Hello and welcome to another edition of Double the Cup here in Brisbane. The sun is not fully shining, but it's still here. I'm Pokuah Frimpong and I'm lucky enough to be joined today by Matt Comito, KEEPUP reporter. How are you, Matt?
Very good, Pokuah, and I have to say it's a lovely setting you've picked for us today. It's a perfect way for us to sort of wrap up our time here in Brisbane.
No, it certainly is, and we've got to pick a good location for the YouTube listeners as well. And of course, Tom Smithies, you're joining us. Smithies, we've seen you around, but now you're officially on Double the Cup.
I feel like I've finally arrived. It's only taken the whole group stage, but I'm here.
No, and we like that. We like to see you here. So, Matt, obviously we've been based in Brisbane for the majority of the tournament where the Matildas have been. What's that experience like been for you?
Well, one of the highlights for me has been watching you get immersed in all the fan culture, the videos that I'm sure our fans have seen. You know, you've been Irish dancing, sampling Nigerian food. I think that it's been probably the highlight for you, I'd say.
No, it's been good, but the Nigerian food, I won't let anybody else know about that. I don't know why you had to let that secret out of the bag. But no, the Irish dancing, that was certainly an experience. Obviously, with the Matildas being up here, we've got to go to their training. We've kind of been a part of camp, but haven't been a part of camp as well. What's that kind of been like?
Yeah, there's been a few days on and a few days off, and when we've gone to Matildas training, we've tried to find out, you know, especially with the sort of everything coming around Sam Kerr's injury and the concussions to Ivy Lewick and Mary Fowler. Every day we've basically been going to try and see who's fit and who's not, and a lot of the time it's been a bit cagey. Tony Gustavsson, the head coach, has played his cards really close to his chest. But I would say, Tom, that's probably been what we've tried to do the most, is just to actually suss out who's going to play and when. And every time a lineup drops, I think we realise that we had no idea all along, and Tony's sort of got his own sort of agenda that he's got playing out. And, you know, sometimes we're just guessing and we're not sure.
To be honest, every World Cup, it's the cat and mouse game. I remember Harry Kewell, they're trying to get Harry Kewell fit in 2006. And hiding behind bushes, they were almost holding up sheets. It's a part of the fun. And of course, the drama that Australia were thrown into one day out, we didn't even find out until the day of the first game that Sam Kerr was going to be out for a reasonably substantial period of time. Then the concussions. I mean, the whole thing has become a sort of litany of bad luck until this point, which is why Australia bouncing back has been so good. But yet, all the fun and games of trying to employ some subterfuge to find out what we can about the Australian team news.
No, and you spoke about some of the other World Cups you've been at. What has this World Cup been like in comparison to all those ones in terms of the access and the storylines? So how has it been having a home World Cup instead of having to travel somewhere else for it?
It's the best, isn't it, according to Gianni Infantino? Unbelievable ticket sales, unbelievable viewing figures. Every game looking sold out. Every game has an amazing atmosphere. It has been a phenomenal thing to be part of. Having travelled around the globe to other World Cups, you immerse yourself in local culture, but it's a really special experience to feel Australia get gripped by football fever and to see the comparison. You know, there's other codes going on, shall we say, and yet the World Cup audiences are matching those and quite often beating them right across the country. I mean, we were in a bar the other night watching a game in another city on our laptop, and when the goal went in the last minute, people came running across the bar to watch, and then they were telling us what the permutations that were on the table. They knew. So it has been amazing to be part of that feeling and that euphoria that swept the country.
No, it really has been, and you've seen it throughout as the tournament has gone on. More and more people have started to get invested. More people have tried to get tickets, and then they found out that the tickets have been sold out for a while because it's been a Women's World Cup for a long period of time. For you, Matt, what's been the most enjoyable experience about being here? Obviously, this is your first World Cup covering it. What has it been like for you?
Yeah, well, I think just like yourself, I've been figuring out as I've been going along next to the experienced head among us in Smithies. You know, the Matildas Nigeria game was obviously a highlight, but I think as Smithy sort of mentioned in the days after, the tension there was so palpable that I think a few days later we went to Brazil, France at the same venue, and just for us, the tension was off of our shoulders and we got to watch the game as a spectacle. And the crowd there that night, something about the Brazilian people and the Brazilian culture, they were there to celebrate. They weren't just there to ride their team over the line. They were there to create a really, really solid atmosphere. And then France came out swinging and ended up winning the game. And I know that I left that game thinking, like, you know, the Matildas atmosphere was special, but wow, that was just something else.
No, it really was. And that's something that's been so impressive about this tournament. Obviously, we've been based up here in Brisbane, but the fans at every single game, the Irish fans are bringing a lot of noise, and so were the English fans. And I think that's something that's opened eyes to a lot of Australians in the public about realising how big of a game football is. Obviously, people know football is a big sport, but when you see it in your own backyard and you see the different fan groups and the way different fan groups kind of celebrate, I think it draws more people at the end of the day.
Yeah, and especially something that was quite stark at the Nigeria vs Ireland game was the fact that that game was happening at the same time as the locals in the crowd were looking up the score at the Matildas Canada game. And we heard it the first couple of goals, especially at first. The first time we thought it was maybe a coincidence, but when the Matildas scored against Canada, we felt this rise, and then the second goal, we were definitely sure.
I know, and that was one of the brilliant things about World Cups is when you have these concurrent games in the group stage, and everyone's doing the maths and the calculations to be doing that live in one stadium while a ferociously important game is going on. What is it, 1,300 kilometres away, and everyone like watching live, looking at their phone. It was just such an extraordinary thing that no other sport can offer, in that so much drama, concurrent drama going on, and things changing by the minute. And then Matilda's third goal goes in, and oh my God, now they've got a fourth goal in the last minute, and suddenly realise the impact that result is going to have across the rest of the tournament. And then you see, just last night when Brazil went out, you know, the excitement of that occasion. You don't want Brazil to go out, but the shock value, everyone's stunned, and all of these incredible moments of drama have just struck everybody.
No, and it's probably a perfect place to lead off and talk about the Matildas. Obviously, a team we've been covering their World Cup. It started so well against the Ireland in that game and getting that really great win with Steph Catley's goal, and then went to that Nigeria game, and it seemed like we've all gone off. The script had gone off, and the Matildas weren't going to make it out of the group stage, but the Matildas rallied back. Tony Gustafsson said he was really proud of his team, and that backs against the wall mentality. How was that, this journey, the emotional wave of following the Matildas and seeing them, it's been quite incredible, actually?
Yeah, well, and I think for us as well, you know, not knowing whether or not the game against Canada, we were going to be packing up and heading home the day later, and it was the same in the Matildas camp. It was really, the tension was so palpable at that point in time. I'm not sure what you felt in that moment going into the stadium as we were. I think you were at the Fan Fest for that night, and I think that was the sort of moment for me that showed, you know, the nature of the World Cup really hangs on a knife edge, and you can just as easily go home. And, you know, if we were to have lost as Australia on that night against Canada and then didn't go through, you know, the sort of context around the team and everything would have been so different. All of a sudden the players are heroes again, you know, and everyone's got this vibe heading into the round of 16, which we're really excited to watch kick off in Sydney. But, you know, at that moment in time when you went to watch the Nigeria-Ireland game and the same Matildas-Canada as well, what were you kind of thinking, you know, because it was almost over before the game started? It
was so strange heading into that game and heading into the fan side. I wasn't actually really feeling anything. I was kind of numb to it. I was like, oh, the game's on. And I was honest, if I'm going to be very honest, I thought Canada were going to get the 3 points, and I think I was just trying to dull my senses so I didn't have to feel the wave of the emotions if we did lose the game as well. But I think once the first whistle went and the ball was kicked, my nerves shot up through the roof, and then that first goal, it was just like, calm now. And it was a nice feeling. And Smithies, obviously you were in Qatar for the Socceroos World Cup, and that was an incredible journey as well. How has this kind of compared the journey, the ups and downs for the Matildas?
I think the crucial difference is if you look at the rankings, that Australian men's team have historically gone to a World Cup, and I mean, they've only got out of the group stage twice. They haven't gone there with any great expectation of doing something at the pointy end of the tournament, whereas the Matildas came into this tournament, and we've said it before, a unique set of circumstances. A team that's on the rise over the last year, a team with a couple of the best players in the world, and a team that's at home, which you cannot overstate the benefit of having an entire country behind you. So there's different levels of expectation at those different World Cups, and I think the men's thing became this amazing journey where they were wringing every last drop out of what they had in order to get over the line, to get out of the group, and then so close to knocking out Argentina in the round of 16. Whereas here, we almost needed Australia to get deep into the tournament for it to be an absolute success, and for that interest level to sustain all the way through. So that, thank goodness, that's all been saved by that amazing performance against Canada.
No, it really hasn't. There have been some players who've really stepped up and have some really big moments. If you look at the likes of Kyra Cooney-Cross, obviously she got into that midfield partnership with Katrina Gorry. Didn't know how it was going to go at the very start of their partnership, but she seems to have blossomed, and it looks like at times, particularly that Nigeria game, Nigeria figured out Katrina Gorry was so important to our side, and they shut her out essentially. But the likes of Kyra Cooney-Cross and these younger players having these really big moments in this tournament, what have you made of that?
Well, if Ian Wright's tweeting about you during the game, I think you're doing something right. You know, Kyra Cooney-Cross, watching her blossom and watching her come out of the A-League at Melbourne Victory, you know, I think those last couple of seasons before she did go to Europe and make a Matildas debut, you know, we all saw it coming. She's brilliant. And watching her flourish alongside Gorry, especially because Gorry was out of the team for a little while through pregnancy and giving birth to Harper as well, and coming back missing the Olympics, and then coming back and having this player and she said it to us at the media opportunities, you know, she took this player under her wing instantly. It might have been the motherhood instinct kicking in after she had Harper, because she took Kyra as well and has taken her under her wing and has helped her turn into a phenomenal player. And I think that we saw that truly come together against Canada. We do see, I think, Tom, Gorry and Kyra can lose the ball in dangerous areas at some points in the games, and we have seen it a couple of times, especially against Nigeria. I think that was really highlighted. But these are all learning experiences, and Kyra's 21. The sky is truly the limit for her. And yeah, I think from what Righty was tweeting about on Monday night, you know, I couldn't agree more, and the sky is really the limit for her.
Slightly painful for a Tottenham fan to be talking about an Arsenal legend, I would have thought. But in terms of that partnership between Cooney-Cross and Katrina Gorry, we did just debating this earlier with the office remotely about who's been amongst the best players at the tournament, and Katrina Gorry has covered so much ground and made so many passes forward. I'd argue she's also at times, and maybe this is just a function of the way that Australia plays, but she has been turned a couple of times and she's given the ball away a couple of times in dangerous areas. I think it's maybe just part of the gamble of the way that team is set up. They're not playing with a purely defensive number 6. They're playing with 2 number 6s who like to get forward and like to play forward automatically. And it's because they're trying to hit teams so quickly on the break. And this is going to become more important as the tournament goes on and we start to play more and more against teams who automatically come at us, as opposed to parking the proverbial bus. And then you really do want to transition quickly, and their ability to hit those balls and look for those forward passes will become so important, but it does come at a risk. And it's part of the drama, it's part of the knife edge, the tightrope, the cliche after cliche of watching the Matildas.
No, it is certainly the cliche of the Matildas. And next up for the Matildas is Denmark. Now, we've played them recently and had good success. The Socceroos have also had success against Denmark recently. What are you looking, when you look into that game, what do you see?
Yeah, well, I think for one, Denmark have struggled to put shots on goal over the first few games. I think that obviously containing the threat of Penny O'Hara will be the number one objective for the team. And I think that'll be a combination of, you know, Hunt and Kennedy in central defence, and also keeping Gorry and Cooney-Cross accountable as midfielders, because that is the real danger player for Denmark. You know, considering the different sort of opponents that we could have had, I think that Denmark is a brilliant way for us to begin the knockout rounds. And you need to remember that in that game, Nigeria versus Ireland, the Irish goalkeeper pulled off save of the tournament, I think, in the first half. And then over the other end, Asisat Oshawala missed a goal that the Barcelona striker would finish every single day of the week. And Nigeria just needed one goal to bump Australia to second, and then all of a sudden Gustafsson's side would be playing England in Brisbane in the round of 16. And, you know, that might not have seemed too big of an ask in the after the first 2 games of the group stage, but we saw how they played against China in that last game with Lauren James doing what she was doing. I think personally that the Matildas will be absolutely delighted with facing Denmark in this round of 16, and like I said, I just think that containing their real danger player will set Australia on course to victory.
What about you, Smithies, when you look at that game?
The thing that's fascinating for me is what does Gustafsson do now against an opponent who Australia have beaten within the last year or so, against an opponent that isn't as frightening as England. Does he keep Sam Kerr on the bench, stick with the team that was so successful against Canada, and hope that it does the job again, and that maybe Kerr doesn't even have to get involved, but at best that she has to play half an hour, you know, because it'll be I think about 2.5 weeks, maybe getting on for 3 weeks since the injury, which is, you know, it's a decent time to heal, but obviously another few days would be even better. So it's a bit of it's a good conundrum to have. It's the opposite to when he was scrabbling to make a forward line with Mary Fowler concussed and all the pressure on Caitlin Ford when Kerr was out in the first two games. So I think it's a really, because Denmark will be watching, will be looking at the tape of that Canada game, and will be concerned by the way, the movement, the connections, the combinations. Catley and Ford back to their best. So much good movement off the ball by the Australians, and they'll be concerned by the way that Australia played.
No, and I also, when I look at that game, I'm wondering if the Matildas, at times with the Matildas, when they've been forced to have a lot of possession, they've kind of sometimes struggled and got into this same repetitive motion of sending long balls forward. So it'll be interesting to see if they do have the majority of the possession against Denmark, will that be a trend that pops up again? Because especially in that Canada game, we didn't see, they didn't have the ball as much, and they seemed to make really quick and decisive decisions with Catley and Carpenter coming up the wings as well. So those kinds of things will be interesting to see as well.
Yeah, but what's the alternative then? When we have possession and teams are sitting a bit deeper as well, and we're challenged to break them down, what do you see Tony maybe making the decision to do? Because for one, I think that a lot of people would like to see someone like Alex Chidiac get a few more minutes. I think, Tom, you said she created 2 chances and 2 shots in the minutes on the park against Nigeria. So I think that maybe that could be an option, especially if Denmark are really sat in and resolute, and gets to that maybe half an hour mark where against Nigeria Gustafsson failed to pull the trigger, and maybe he could pull the trigger a bit earlier on something like that.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because when I look at the play like Mary Fowler, I actually think that Mary Fowler could be the key for us in the midfield and be that creative link that links up with Ford and Kerr and things like that. But obviously that is dependent on if Sam Kerr is fit and if we have another striker available. But when I ultimately see Mary Fowler and the way she plays the game, she seems to suit a number 10, but Tony Gustafsson is really persistent with playing her as a number 9, and she's had success there. But maybe, the solution is already on the field. It's just a change of, formation. But we'll never know, and we'll never know until Tony Gustafsson maybe tries it one day. We'll see. But you mentioned Lauren James earlier. She has been absolutely phenomenal in the last 2 games that she's played. Serena Wiegmann didn't play her at the start of the tournament, and that was a bit controversial in nature. But ever since she has started, I believe it's 3 goals now in the games in the tournament so far. How impressed have you been with her?
Against China, Lauren James was truly running the show, and I think that the disallowed goal was a shame, but the 2 goals that she did score, you could say that either of them were contenders for goal of the tournament. However, there are obviously some really, really exceptional strikes to contend with. For me, Marta Cox last night for Panama, the free kick, 40 yards, 2nd minute against France, and she pulls that out of her locker. That is an iconic World Cup moment, but there are so many to contend with, right, Pokuah?
No, there really are, and it was beautiful to see those Panama players celebrating so much as if they'd won the game. But that goal is truly remarkable. The distance and accuracy was sensational. But for me, I think the goal of the tournament's got to be Linda Caicedo's goal, because there was just so much to it. And I remember watching it and feeling like it was in slow motion. I was slowly getting up as she did each little move, and just to find the space in between the 2 players, and to have the confidence and also the audacity to take that shot after coming inside and place it so beautifully. I think that's just been phenomenal. And she's had an incredible tournament, and it's been a difficult tournament as well. It hasn't been easy for her, but she's found moments and been able to get Colombia to this point. And for you, Smithies, is there a goal that sticks out as goal of the tournament?
The brilliant thing for me has been the array of different goals. I mean, I know you were getting very excited about Katie McCabe's Olympico. I'm always going to be a bit dodgy about a corner that goes.
I've seen her do it at Arsenal. It's a thing. It's a thing.
But Brazil score. Ari Borges scores an amazing hat-trick. But then they produce one of the great team goals of all time. We've seen free kicks. We've seen Spain putting the ball in the top corner more than once from distance. And Lauren James. I mean, you could pick any one of those. And yes, it wasn't offside. Just for the record. That's been the beauty for me, is that we have seen so many different goals, and the joyousness with which they're celebrated almost out of the context of the game sometimes has been just phenomenal. Even South Africa winning the game in the last minute, having conceded an equaliser to Italy, it just the excitement levels just blow the roof off.
No, it really has. And I think something also that has been really incredible about this tournament is we've seen the growth of football globally. Because if we're looking at it, say Nigeria have qualified, and so have South Africa, and that's a really massive step for African football at this point as well. And we've seen Jamaica make it through to the round of 16 after only scoring 1 goal and not conceding. I feel like that's got to be the lowest in some record around. But how impressed have you been with the development of football internationally after the tournament has been expanded?
Yeah, well, I think that one of the things that, we commend some of these teams like Jamaica, like Nigeria, for making it to the round of 16 when they've had such little support from their football associations, and that shouldn't be the case. We shouldn't be having to commend these players for showing up, having match fees, not promised to them, not given, and things like that. Like, those things are a terrible aspect of the game right now. But having said that, the fact that they are here as teams and producing what they have and showing the sort of maturity and mentality to put things to the side and play for their nation with pride, I think that's one thing that we've really felt, especially because Nigeria have been based here. We went to their training session. We've been to many press conferences with their head coach, Randy Waldrum, who had heaps to say about the Nigerian.
Probably the funniest coach at this tournament.
Yeah, he's so laid back, the American accent, the sort of the way that he speaks, his whole sort of attitude has been really quite endearing, and he's been one of my favourite characters to interact with over the tournament. But I just think that he bred the same resilience, and I don't know if you saw the South African head coach speaking after the game last night, but you would just want to run through a brick wall for some of these coaches, and I think that that's the whole part of the World Cup. The teams that may not go on to win the World Cup, they still create history and amazing moments. And even, like you mentioned, Panama celebrating at 5-3, there's still 5 minutes to go and eventually 13 minutes of additional time. And the Panama players are dancing in the corner, and you're sitting there screaming, going, you can still get back, it can be a draw, you could maybe even win it. But those moments are so big for these sort of minnow countries, and I think that that's something that's just been such a big highlight of this tournament, along with the massive crowds, along with the upsets. It's just the teams that are going through adversity that they shouldn't really be going through and still coming out and putting on a really, really great performance they can be proud of.
No, and they certainly have, and I think it's something that has given a massive boost to this tournament as well, because I think that some people go and buy tickets to games where they'd probably expect, it wouldn't be that great, but they've been pleasantly surprised by some of the performances. And do you think this is a step forward for football in this country, Smithies?
It's a step forward for football, full stop. I mean, every World Cup there are the games you don't expect, the 5-4s you don't see coming. We haven't had the blowouts by and large that were predicted, 1 or 2. But even when France scores 6, Panama will not be beaten. They will, at least they will be beaten in the end, but they will not be bowed. They scored 3 goals. There's so many times that we've seen teams refuse to be intimidated by reputation and by playing their opponents on the value of what's in front of them. Brazil in the end were desperately disappointing in their 0-0 draw with Jamaica, but partly because Jamaica made them that. They were so well structured. And they played with such spirit and intelligence, and you think, wow, that's not a big gap between those teams. And in fact, there was no gap in the scoreline, and then suddenly Brazil are going home. So yeah, it's been phenomenal for people who I think might have been snobby about women's football to come to the World Cup to see the elite of the women's game. And as somebody said, you see goals that are just great goals, full stop. There's no qualifier attached.
No, it's been sensational. It's been a joy to be in Queensland with you guys, and I appreciate, Matt, thank you for joining me today, and you too, Smithies, and you'll be Smithies from now on. I don't know, we don't need to go with the Tom anymore. But to catch all the latest news about the Women's World Cup, you can go to keepup.com.au and can catch Dub of the Cup on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and wherever you listen to your podcasts. And I've been Pokuah Frimpong. Thank you.